Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for the historic best of one format. The metagame challenge this upcoming weekend will be historic best of three. So I'll be doing a deep dive. I got to curate a bunch of lists. Historic best of three is not a heavily populated data source, so I will scour and find deck lists ahead of that, so I'll give you some ideas. But for those of you new, what we do every week is we look at what are the best decks on the ladder, and we get the data from what you see on the screen on TapGG predominantly. We'll also look at like MTGO leagues for formats where that's relevant, just kind of other sources as well. But this is win rate matrix, win rate stats in terms of actual percentage of wins on the ladder itself. So we'll go through, cover it all. I'll post all these deck lists in the video description. If you're looking for standard, explorer, best of three, whatever it is, I try to cover each format in both play modes, best of one, best of three, each week. So that'll be in the video description, in the playlist. So if you want to just hop in there, you can find past videos. And as been mentioned on the last couple videos, programming note, we're trying to hit 10,000 subs by June. We're closing in on 8,000. If you haven't subbed to the channel, it's free. You literally press a button, helps me out. If you are subbed, thank you. And as always, likes and comments do help out. A bunch of the free ways to help out the channel. I don't want to ask for monetary like subs or anything. People keep your money. The easiest way you can support the channel is, like I said, liking, commenting, and subscribing for free. So in any case, we'll jump into it. Historic best of one, we're looking March 4th through the 11th. Platinum to Mythic rank, 28,000 games of Magic were played. And going into it, Affinity decks are at the top of the meta. 2 Affinity decks. We'll look at Boros first, as well as Esper. Then kind of draw some conclusions in terms of a potential way to attack the meta given the prevalence of these decks. So the core of these decks are very similar. So we have the Boros Affinity at 67% win rate. They're built around the combination of Retrofitter Foundry and abusing the last mode where you get to basically sacrifice a Thopter to create a 4/4. So you have Ornithopter, where on turn 1, you can play both the Foundry and Ornithopter and get a 4/4. It's a mana sink that lets you tap and tap and then create some value there. So you have that engine. In the Boros version, you also have Barbed Spike, which creates a Thopter, as well as Yotai Declares War, which creates a Thopter. The Yotai is also a pseudo removal spell, and then a pump effect for one of your artifacts. You're pairing that with things like Esper Sentinel that can provide you card advantage, portable holes removal. The Boros version's a little bit more aggressively slanted in individual cards. So you have Toolcraft Exemplar, which gets a bonus in terms of attacking, a couple copies of Shadowsphere for trample and lifelink, Mashiko to pump your team, along with Chapter 3 of the Yotai Declares War to make a creature's base power 4/4. And then you also have Ingenious Smith. This is Artifact. So it can be like you could animate a portable hole, for example, or a Citadel. You have Ingenious Smith that helps you dig into your deck to find more artifacts, and then it gets bigger once per turn when an artifact enters the battlefield. Notably, you can do it on your opponent's turn by using the Retrofitter Foundry to create like a colorless servo, for example, on your opponent's turn. With the advent of the Boros pain lines, you're better off just playing those instead of the Spire of Industry. It effectively does the same thing as Spire, but it doesn't require you to have an artifact. So if you need a white source on turn 1, you're able to generate that white source by still taking damage, but you don't need the artifact. So if you want to go turn 1 Esper Sentinel, you're still able to do that. So I would make that change. This mana base is a little bit dated in that respect. So then we go to the Esper version. It's at 63% win rate. So very similar elements to it. You still have your Esper Sentinels, portable holes, foundries, Ornithopter. This version is also playing the Hope of Girapur, which can kind of stop your opponent's combo turns. It's a Thopter itself, so it's another way to kind of enable the Foundry early. This version's on kind of the dual buff. You have the Ensoul artifacts as well as Mashiko to power up your team. So Artifact gives base power toughness 5/5. This gives a boost based on the number of creatures you control. Sorry, forgot to state, both these decks are Lurrus decks. Lurrus is hanging out down here as a companion. The big kind of draw at this deck is you get access to Innovator Metatech. 2 mana, 1/3. Whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get to seek a non-land card with mana value 2 or less. So notably, Seek is kind of adjacent to draw. It won't trigger the Sheoldred for like the draw effects, won't get hit by Narset, and it guarantees that you find action. So it's a little worse if you're stuck on mana, but it always kind of ensures that you're hitting gas in the deck, and it can hit any card in the deck. You also have Volt Scourge, which is just being cast for 1 and 2 life in this deck, and it's a lifelink body that you can throw like in Soul or Pump Effects, helps you in terms of racing with the deck. And you're seeing similarly it's using the Pain line, Adhikar Wastes in this case here. A new deck for the week that we haven't seen in quite some time actually. So 63% for Selesnya Auras. So Auras was a very popular deck. It's kind of gotten hated out of the meta through various reasons, like all the cheap removal decks, stuff of that nature. But kind of the payoff with going green, so you have access to Sithis Harvest Hand. So it's another engine card. Whenever you cast an enchantment, you gain a life, draw a card, so that helps you keep going. You have Core Spirit Dancer, as well as Light Pause, which lets you kind of tutor up specific effects. So you kind of get some value there. You're also using All-Seed of Life's Bounty in this deck. This lets you kind of have a protection effect while it being an enchantment. You also have Kami of Bamboo Groves. So this is another way to kind of put a land into play. It's an enchantment itself. You sometimes see Generous Visitor in place of this. I think largely I'd probably rather play Generous Visitor than this card here. Generous Visitor being the 1 mana 1/1 that whenever you cast an enchantment, you get to put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. So what you'll notice with the deck is with Light Pause, it gives you kind of a tutorable effect. So whenever you cast an aura, you can go find another aura and attach it. So you have like Audacity, which is kind of Rancor style effect. Creature gets +2/0 and has Trample, Trample being the keyword. You can make very large creatures, but if your opponent just chump blocks all the time, it's not really that effective. So you have like the Audacities here. You would have Cartouche that gets the first strike, and this one, yeah, first strike and the token has Vigilance. Ethereal Armor gives you a boost based on number of enchantments you control and has first strike. Similarly with All That Glitters. I don't know what Radiant Grace does. Enters battlefield, gets +1/0 and has Vigilance. When it dies, return to the battlefield transformed. Enchant player, creatures enchant. So it's kind of like a hate piece, but gives you Vigilance, so it lets you attack into Wandering Emperor. Kind of some insulation effects, like in case the creatures die, you get some value. Rune of Substance for Light, Rune of Might for Trample, kind of mixed into that. I will say that this mana base, again, we have the Selesnya fast lines. You do not play Sun Petal Grove anymore. This line is going to come into play tapped more than anything. So I would not play the Sun Petal Grove. And then play, I think it's not Brushland, the fast line from the latest set, the Phyrexia set. Going on, we have Izzet Belcher. So this is a combo deck, and it's basically you're not playing lands, but you're playing lands. So the core of the deck, all your lands in the deck are the module dual face lands. And what you're trying to do as early as turn 3 through the things of like treasure effects like Strike It Rich or the treasure from Magma Opus is if you cast Ironcrag Feet, it generates 7 mana, and then you're able to cast Goblin Charbelcher and then have enough mana to activate it. Because it doesn't view these dual face cards as lands, you're able to flip your entire library into your graveyard or wherever the zone they go and just kind of like super fireball your opponent. You have interaction with like Brotherhood's End, Strangle, Spikefield Hazard to interact with your opponent, as well as on the stack with Pact of Negation. Notably, if this resolves, you can only cast 1 more spell for the turn. So if they then counter Belcher, you can't cast this. You're also able to always find Belcher by Indomitable Creativity any of your artifacts. Since the Belcher is the only other card in your deck, you always find it in that regard there. So that's kind of the combo at a nutshell. It can win games. I personally find this deck kind of boring to play. You're very much just doing your thing each time, but it's very repetitive, I find. So keep that with some mind. If you enjoy these types of decks, all the power to you. I played it. I had a good rate with it, but I was questioning what I was doing in the sense of like, I'm not having fun. Why am I playing this? Then going to the Wizards deck, and the Wizards deck was always one that was pretty high up. It can have a bit of an issue against these affinity style decks. The fact they can make 4/4s, you don't always are able to like interact with them. But the core of this deck is kind of like a prowess style deck, kind of magecrafty, if you will. So you have the Symmetry Sage, which is buffed. It's an 0/3, but whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, target creature's base power becomes 3. So that in conjunction with like Balmor giving a boost to your team lets your Dreadhorde Arcanist flashback 2 and 3 CMC spells from your graveyard. So this lets you flashback like Expressive Iteration, Static Discharge, Wizard's Lightning, Mentor's Guidance. So you get to reuse your card advantage effects. And then you could also give it haste with things like Reckless Charge. The Soulscar Mage lets you scale and kind of put -1/1 counters as opposed to burn. So lets you deal with things over multiple turns. And then it's just a bunch of burn and card advantage in the deck itself. Mana base looks good in this one. 20 lands with the Spike Field. I've sometimes played up to 21, just because you really want to be at 3 lands. Beyond that, you're a little stuck, but I think 3 lands is kind of the sweet spot for the deck. And lastly, we have Mono Red Burn. So I was also playing a Boros Burn the past seasons. With like Luris, Risk Factor, Lightning Helix, kind of the same or similar shell, Dragon Rage Chandler as opposed to Soulscar Mage. It's very bad as against the artifact decks. While you can race them sometimes, dealing with a 4/4, especially if they could get lifelink, hard to play from behind in that deck. So this month, with the like prevalence of that deck, it's a little worse. I would either heed playing that deck, or I would suggest, honestly, like, and we're kind of going to, like in the summary, Brotherhood's End seems really well positioned in the meta right now. It deals with all the affinity decks, it deals with Wizards decks, it can deal with like the treasures, potentially from Belcher to kind of slow them down. You have enough burn spells, but you're kind of shifting the deck into kind of a burn control deck. And that's what I was doing in the best of 3 version of the Boros Burn deck. I had 3 Brotherhood's End in the sideboard against any of the creature decks. I kind of scaled out and just tried to win the kind of control-y game with like Planeswalkers and stuff like that. But core of this deck is throw fireballs at your opponent's face, Static Discharge, Lightning Strike, Electrostatic Blast, Spike Field Hazard, Play with Fire, Stomp, all deal damage to your opponent, Prowess effects in Swiftspear and Soulscar, Eidolon pings your opponent and deals burn damage, and then Torbrand doubles up or does additional 2 for each of your kind of burn spells there. 22 lands is a little light in this deck if you're on Torbrand. I'm not like crazy, to be honest, about Torbrand in these shells anyways. 4 mana do nothing in this format when people are usually winning on turn 4. If anything, I would probably cut the Torbrand and in the 3-drop spot play Lelia or Ambergris just as a card advantage engine. Either that or play something like Chandra Torch of Defiance in that spot instead. Just kind of card advantage. I always find Torbrand a little bit more win more in these decks. He can't tap out turn 4. You're behind on board, it doesn't do much. You're ahead on board, you're probably winning anyways in that respect. So that's it for the week. Like I said, I'm going to get to the best of 3. I have to look beyond Untapped because there's only 2 decks showing up on Untapped right now. And I want to get kind of a curated list of best of 3 options for the metagame challenge. Hopefully as well, it kind of illuminates some new deck ideas that could be played. But as always, let me know in the comments what's been working for you, what's not. If you got cool lists, potentially feature on the channel. But thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.